So what's the biggest political crisis facing our country? You can say it's the NHS, you can say it's the cost of living, or you could say it's immigration. Well, I tell you, it's a population explosion. Think about this. Tony Blair comes to power in 1997. The British population is 58 million. What is it today? It's 68 million. And 85% of that rise is directly down to Labour and Conservative immigration policies. And already we can't get GP appointments. There's a waiting list of nearly 8 million people who want medical procedures. There is a housing crisis that is totally extraordinary. Well over 1 million people waiting on the social housing list. And for those that want to get their foot on the first rung of the ladder, well, frankly, property has become unaffordable. Demand massively outstripping supply. And you think about it, even if we build 250,000 new homes every year, that doesn't even cope with net migration to Britain last year of 750,000. This is impacting every single aspect of our lives. Think about the roads. I mean, how long does it take you now to plan a journey to go from the south to the north of England or whatever else it may be? Our quality of life is being diminished by the population explosion. And yet, in Parliament, in much of mainstream media, it's wall to wall. All immigration is good. We've got shortages of jobs. We need more people. Well, today, I think a real bombshell came. The Office of National Statistics have told us the population will hit 70 million by the middle of 2026. The original forecast for that was 2035. But they also say that between now and 2035, the British population will increase by another 6 million people. And nearly all of that is due to net migration. And what makes me angry is we know there are many in the Labour Party who don't believe in national boundaries, who are totally unconcerned by immigration, that it was Tony Blair that actually started all of this. Mass migration into Britain on a level that had never been seen before. You know, from Windrush until Blair, net migration averaged about 30,000 a year. Under Blair, it went up to about 250,000 a year. Now under the Conservatives, it is up to 750,000 every year. We voted Brexit to get back control of our borders. We voted Brexit, we voted Conservative in 2019 to reduce the number of people coming into the country. And this isn't about being anti-foreigner or anything of the kind. This country actually can assimilate people from all over the world and do it far better, I think, than any of our European neighbours. But you finish up with mass migration on this level, with large parts of our cities that become almost unrecognisable. So there's a social element to this as well. There's a wage element to this as well, driving wages down to the minimum wage. This is affecting all of us, and yet, when I heard Rishi Sunak the other day say he was concerned about levels of immigration into Britain, the only word that could possibly come into my mind was liar. They literally have lied to us. They took our votes in 2019 and they basically said, look, we know you want numbers reduced. And that's before we even begin to talk about tens of thousands of young men without passports or ID crossing the English Channel. So I think whichever way you look at it, whether it's the cost of living crisis, whether it's the NHS, whether it's the state of our roads and travelling around the country, in every single aspect, it is the population crisis that is the number one. That is what is driving most of the concerns that people out there in the country have, whether they know it or not. And yet, who talks about the population explosion? Who was the last person to tell you that our population had increased by 10 million since Blair came to power? Well, I think today, the Office of National Statistics have perhaps come up with numbers that are so mind-blowing, so mind-bending, that maybe at last will begin to take notice. Whether anybody in Westminster cares, whether the BBC or Sky or others care to report it, it's something we need to understand. Let's face up to the hard truth. We cannot and we should not be accepting vast numbers of people into Britain every single year. It doesn't work. Mass migration into Britain has now become a disaster for this country.